The first warning came at 2:17 a.m., a soft crunch of gravel that didn't belong to the wind. I was awake already. You don't survive 8 years as an army sniper by sleeping deeply in unfamiliar territory, especially not on a mountain you bought for less than the price of a used pickup truck, sight unseen, at a government auction no one else wanted. The thermal scope lit up my world in shades of white and ash. Pines glowed faintly. Rocks held the day's cold like old grudges. And then, there it was. Movement. 3 heat signatures, low and deliberate, advancing uphill toward the cabin. Toward me. They moved like men who thought they were alone. Careless spacing. No rear security. No understanding of elevation, wind, or the fact that the mountain itself was watching them fail. I lowered the scope and exhaled slowly. If they had known who owned this land, they wouldn't have come within 10 miles of it. If they had known who was inside the cabin, they wouldn't have come at all. But they didn't. They thought this place was abandoned. Forgotten. Just another failed government property rotting in the wilderness. A remote mountain with a broken road, a decaying fire leucate, and a single off-grid cabin no one had claimed in decades. That was their mistake. Because I didn't buy this mountain to get away from people. I bought it because I understood terrain. And terrain, used properly, turns one man into an army. The wind shifted. I smiled without humor. The thieves were about to learn something the hard way. This mountain wasn't empty. It was occupied. I bought the mountain 6 months earlier, on a boring Tuesday afternoon, while sitting in a coffee shop with bad Wi-Fi and worse espresso. The auction listing was laughably vague. Former federal land parcel. No utilities. No guaranteed access. Sold as is. No pictures. No maps worth a damn. Just coordinates and acreage. Everyone else scrolled past it. I didn't, because I recognized the coordinates instantly. During a deployment years earlier, I trained near that exact range. High elevation. Limited access points. Natural chokeholds. Long sightlines. Brutal winters. Invisible in summer. A sniper's paradise. To civilians, it was worthless land. To me, it was a fortress. The bidding was almost insulting. One other bidder tapped out early. I won the entire mountain, over 4,000 acres, for less than I made in a year. Friends thought I'd lost my mind. You bought what? One of them laughed. There's nothing up there. That was the point. I didn't tell them about the cabin. I didn't tell them about the old fire lookout tower still standing on the northern ridge. And I definitely didn't tell them about the forgotten service road that could only be navigated if you knew exactly where to turn, or when to stop. Some knowledge is owned. Some is paid for in blood. I spent the next few months doing what I do best. Reckon. I hiked every ridge. Marked every blind corner. Learned how sound traveled at different times of day. Where fog settled thick enough to hide movement. Where snow drifted deep and treacherous. Where radio signals died. I repaired the cabin quietly. Reinforced doors. Replaced windows with impact-resistant glass that looked old but wasn't. Installed solar panels low enough to avoid reflection. Buried a fuel cache far from the main structure. No cameras. No alarms. I didn't need them. The mountain told me everything. Then, about 3 weeks ago, I noticed something new. Footprints. Not hikers. Not hunters. Too heavy. Too frequent. Always circling, never committing. Someone had found the listing. Someone had come looking. I erased the tracks and waited. Back in the present, the 3 men had split up. Another mistake. One stayed low near the tree line. 2 advanced toward the cabin. They were armed. Poly-trained, but armed. I could hear them now. Whispering. Laughing quietly. Talking about what they'd take. Copper wiring. Solar panels. Whatever rich idiot built this place. I let them get closer. Distance is a language, and I wanted them fluent before the lesson began. My rifle was steady, breath slow, heart calm. I wasn't angry. I was disappointed. Because there's a difference between thieves and survivors. Survivors ask questions. These men didn't. The lead thief reached the porch, tested the door handle. Locked. He cursed under his breath. That's when I spoke. Step away from the door. My voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once, carried by the mountain's natural acoustics. They froze. Panic spiked their heat signatures bright white. One of them raised his weapon. I adjusted my aim, not at his chest. At the dot 2 inches from his foot. The shot cracked through the night like thunder. He screamed and fell backward. I didn't need to hit them. I just needed them to understand. This is private land, I continued calmly. You are trespassing. You have 30 seconds to leave. Silence. Then shouting. Confusion. Fear. The third man, still near the tree line, ran. Smartest thing any of them did all night. The other two hesitated. That was mistake number 4. I checked the wind again and prepared to end the lesson. They didn't run. That told me everything I needed to know. 30 seconds passed. Then 40. The 2 men on the porch whispered furiously. Panic thickened their voices. Fear makes people stupid, but greed makes them stubborn. They were trying to decide whether I was bluffing, whether the voice in the dark was real or just some hillbilly scare tactic. The third man was already gone, crashing downhill through brush and loose stone. I let him run. Fear would carry him farther than I ever could. The other 2, they stayed. I shifted position slowly, the way you do when you've learned that even the mountain can hear impatience. The cabin sat halfway up the slope, backed by rock and shielded by thick timber on 3 sides. I'd chosen this spot because it forced anyone approaching to funnel through predictable angles I had memorized. I moved to a secondary firing position inside the cabin, sliding the rifle through a narrow firing slit I'd built into the wall months earlier. From the outside, it looked like a crack in old timber. From the inside, it was a perfect line of sight. The man with the rifle, the loud one, stepped off the porch and raised his weapon toward the trees. Bad move. I flicked the safety off, adjusted elevation by instinct, and fired again. This time, I hit his weapon. Metal exploded in sparks. The rifle flew from his hands, shattered and useless. He screamed louder than before, dropping to his knees, clutching his fingers like they'd been shot off. They hadn't, but he didn't know that yet. Last warning, I said, my voice calm, steady, almost bored. Leave. Now. The second man, thinner, quieter, grabbed his partner by the jacket. Let's go, he hissed. This isn't worth it. For a moment, I thought they'd finally learned. Then the loud one did something truly stupid. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a pistol. I felt my jaw tighten. There's a moment, right before violence escalates, where time stretches thin. Training takes over. Emotion disappears. The world narrows to breath, trigger pressure, wind. I didn't want to kill them, but I would. I fired a third shot. The bullet tore through the dirt between them, kicking up a cloud of frozen soil and pine needles, close enough that they felt it in their teeth. The message landed. They broke. Both men turned and ran, slipping on frost-slick rock, shouting over each other in blind panic as they fled downhill after their smarter friend. I tracked them through the scope until their heat signatures disappeared into the forest. Then I waited, because fear makes people run, but desperation makes them come back. I didn't sleep that night. I brewed coffee on the small propane stove and sat in the dark, listening to the mountain breathe, wind through the trees, a distant owl, ice cracking in the rocks as temperatures dropped. At dawn, I climbed to the lookout tower. It took 20 minutes on a narrow switchback trail I'd cut myself. The tower was old, rusted stays, warped planks, but solid. From the top, I could see nearly the entire southern approach to the mountain. Tracks told the story clearly. The 3 men had regrouped at the base of the slope. They'd argued, walked in circles. One of them, probably the quiet one, had pointed back down the service road. They should have listened. Instead, they split again. One headed downhill. 2 came back up, not toward the cabin, toward the fuel cache. My fuel cache. I smiled thinly. So they'd been watching longer than I thought. That made them more dangerous and more careless. I packed light and moved fast, descending the ridge through dead ground where the terrain folded inward, hiding me completely. The wind was perfect, blowing from them to me. They wouldn't smell or hear a thing. They were talking openly now, convinced they were out of my sight. Guys got to have supplies, one said. Nobody lives up here without fuel. Maybe he's bluffing, the other replied. Maybe he just wanted us gade. I almost laughed. They reached the cache site, a false rock outcrop I'd built over buried containers. From a distance, it looked natural. Up close, only someone who knew what to look for could tell. They didn't. They pried at the stones, cursed, kicked at the frozen dirt. That's when I stepped out from behind them. Drop it. Both men froze. Slowly, they turned. Up close, they looked worse. Dirty, nervous, red-eyed. This wasn't a planned operation. This was opportunism fueled by bad information and worse judgment. The loud one recognized my voice immediately. You, he breathed. You're the one from the cabin. Correct. You shot at us. I warned you. He swallowed hard. You could have killed us. Yes. Silence stretched. The quiet one finally spoke. We didn't know anyone lived here. That's because I like it that way. I motioned with a rifle. Hands on your heads. Kneel. They obeyed. People always do once they understand who has control. I searched them quickly. Cheap pistols. A knife. No radios. No maps. No idea where they were. Idiots with weapons are the most dangerous kind. Who sent you? I asked. No one. The loud one said quickly. We saw the auction listing. Thought maybe there'd be scrap. Or supplies. People pay good money for solar panels. And the others? I asked. He hesitated. There are others, I repeated. He nodded reluctantly. Two more. Down by the road. They were supposed to watch the truck. So 5 total. That changed things. I considered my options. I could detain them, march them down the mountain, call authorities. Oh, I looked around. The mountain was quiet, empty, vast. Law enforcement response time out here was measured in hours. If they came back with friends, with better weapons, this would escalate fast. I made a decision. You're leaving, I said. All of you. Tonight. The loud one laughed nervously. You can't just. I leaned in close, my voice low. I can do whatever I want on my land. His laughter died. You're going to walk back down the mountain, I continued. You're going to get in your truck, and you're going to drive until this place is a bad dream. And if we don't, the quiet one asked. I stood, shouldered the rifle, and looked out across the valley. Then the mountain keeps you. They didn't ask what that meant. I escorted them halfway down, released them where the terrain opened into a long, exposed slope. Run, I told them. They did. Night fell again. I thought it was over. I was wrong. At 11:48 p.m., I heard an engine. Not one, two. Headlights flickered far below, cutting through trees where no road officially existed. They brought reinforcements. And this time, they weren't here to steal. They were here to settle a score. I returned to the cabin, heart steady, mind clear. The mountain had given them every warning. Now it was my turn to respond. The engines cut off at the tree line. That told me this wasn't a drunk joyride or a couple of idiots lost on back roads. Whoever was down there understood at least one thing. Noise carries uphill at night. They were learning. Slowly. Too slowly. I killed the lantern and let the cabin dissolve into darkness. Night vision goggles slid into place, the world blooming green and sharp. I moved through the cabin without touching the floorboards that creaked, stepped past the door entirely, and exited through a rear crawl hatch hidden beneath the woodpile. Cold air bit at my lungs. Good. It kept me awake. From my overwatch position 50 yards uphill, I lay prone among rocks that had been there longer than any human mistake. Below me, headlights flickered off. Doors opened softly. Voices murmured. 5 heat signatures. One more than before. So they'd replaced the runner. I watched them spread out with marginal improvement, wider spacing, one man hanging back with a rifle. Not military, but not clueless anymore either. Someone had convinced them this was personal. I zoomed in on the new signature. Bigger build. Calm movements. Weapons slung properly. He wasn't talking much. That was the problem. Experience recognizes experience, even at a distance. I tracked him as he studied the slope, the cabin, the tree line. He wasn't looking for loot. He was looking for me. Finally, he spoke. Lights out, he whispered. We move quiet from here. Too late. The mountain already knew them. I slid backward and melted into the terrain, circling downslope through a game trail I'd widened just enough for boots, but not enough to look disturbed. I wasn't defending the cabin anymore. I was hunting. They advanced in a staggered line, weapons up, nerves tight. I let them come halfway up before I acted. Fear works best when it blooms behind you. The rear man, young, skinny, breathing too fast, lagged slightly. He kept looking over his shoulder. I appeared behind him like the forest itself had decided to speak. My hand clamped over his mouth. The knife pressed under his jaw, not cutting, just enough pressure to remind him how fragile he was. "Don't," I whispered. His whole body locked. I dragged him backward into the brush, careful, controlled. He smelled like gasoline in panic. "Sit," I said quietly. "He's Saturday." Yell, I continued, "and you die." He nodded so hard his teeth clicked. I zip-tied his wrists, taped his mouth, and left him against a tree, shaking like a leaf. 1 down. 4 to go. I didn't rush. Rushing gets you killed. Instead, I repositioned uphill, letting distance stretch again. They noticed a missing man about 2 minutes later. "Where's Kyle?" someone hissed. No answer. The big man raised a fist. They stopped. I watched his head turn slowly, scanning. He felt it now, that sense of being watched, hunted. Good instincts, wrong mountain. He whispered something, and they changed formation, bunching closer together. Another mistake. I fired once. The shot hit a tree 10 feet to their right, dead center, deliberate. They scattered instantly, shouting, tripping, losing coordination. One fired blindly into the woods. Another fell. Chaos is contagious. I moved again. This time, I flanked left, downhill, staying just outside their peripheral vision. The man with a rifle, the leader, took cover behind a rock and tried to regain control. "Spread out. Find him." I answered by killing their lights. One by one, their flashlights shattered in quick succession, plunging the slope into darkness. Panic spiked. Breathing went ragged. Someone prayed. The leader swore. "You're not the only one with training," he shouted into the dark. "You hear me? We know you're up there." I smiled to myself. He was wrong. I wasn't up there anymore. I was behind him. I tackled him hard, driving him into the dirt before he could swing the rifle. We rolled, grunting, boots kicking. He was strong, stronger than the others, and trained enough to fight back. But training fades. Instinct doesn't. I disarmed him with a twist, slammed my elbow into his ribs, and pinned him face down, knee between his shoulder blades. "Who are you?" he gasped. "Owner," I said. He laughed breathlessly. "Figures." I zip-tied him too, gagged him, dragged him into cover. 2 down. The remaining 2 were breaking. One ran downhill, firing wildly. The other froze, crouched behind a stump, rocking slightly. I approached the frozen one openly, rifle lowered but ready. "Stand up," I said. He did, hands shaking, eyes wild. "We thought you were just some prepper," he stammered. "We didn't know." "Everyone says that," I replied. I disarmed him and bound him without resistance. The runner didn't get far. The mountain took him. I found him 20 minutes later, ankles shattered at the base of a ravine he hadn't seen in the dark. He was alive, screaming. I stopped the bleeding and tied him up too. I'm not a monster. I just finished what others start. Dawn broke pale and cold. 5 men sat lined up near the cabin, wrists bound, faces hollow with exhaustion and fear. Steam rose from their breath. The leader finally spoke through his gag when I removed it. "You ex-military?" he asked. "Army," I said. "Sniper." That landed harder than any bullet. He nodded slowly. "That explains the auction." I raised an eyebrow. "Explain." He hesitated, then sighed. The listing got passed around certain forums. People figured no civilian would buy it, thought it to be empty for months. "And you?" I asked. I was supposed to make sure it was. That was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't random theft. It was a test. "Who sent you?" I asked quietly. He looked at the others, then back at me. People who don't like loose ends, he said, and don't like soldiers who disappear. The mountain felt colder suddenly. I crouched in front of him. You picked the wrong soldier. He met my eyes. For the first time, fear gave way to respect. I see that now. I stood. I called it in. Authorities would arrive by noon. I'd already documented everything. Tracks, weapons, vehicles, recordings. The law would do its part. But as the helicopters echoed faintly in the distance, I knew something else too. This mountain wasn't just land anymore. It was a message. And somewhere out there, someone had just received it. The helicopters arrived just before noon, their rotors chopping the cold air into something sharp and unreal. 2 state birds, gray and unmarked except for the registration numbers. No news crews. No curiosity seekers. Just professionals who knew how to keep their mouths shut. That alone told me this wasn't going to be written up as a simple trespassing case. I stood off to the side while deputies secured the men, separated them, read them their rights. None resisted. None spoke. The leader, Marcus, according to the ID they pulled, met my eyes once as they loaded him aboard. Not anger, calculation. He still thought this was unfinished. I handed over my rifle, my sidearm, my documentation. Every round fired accounted for. Body cams caught most of it. The deputies were polite, cautious, and more than a little unsettled by how calm I was. One of them, a sergeant with silver in his beard, finally asked, "You military?" "Former," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Thought so." They flew the men out, but they didn't leave. 2 hours later, a black SUV crawled up the service road like it belonged there. It didn't. No markings. Government plates. Tires too clean for the climb. The driver stayed inside. The passenger door opened, and a woman stepped out wearing boots that had never seen mud and a jacket that cost more than my first rifle. She looked around, taking in the cabin, the terrain, the tower on the ridge. Then she smiled. "You've done some impressive work here," she said. "I didn't invite you," I replied. "No," she agreed. "But you invited attention the moment you clicked bid." She held up a badge, not military, not police, something else. 3 letters I hadn't seen in years. My jaw tightened. "I'm not active," I said. "We know," she replied smoothly. "That's why this is complicated." She introduced herself as Dana Holt, civilian liaison, contractor oversight, a job title designed to mean everything and nothing. "Those men last night," she continued, "weren't thieves." "I figured," I said. "They were part of a private recovery group," she said carefully. "Unofficial. Deniable." "Recovery of what?" I asked. She gestured at the mountain. "You." We sat inside the cabin, sunlight spilling across the table where maps still lay spread out. She didn't touch anything without asking. "Smart. You disappeared," Dana said. "No debrief. No consulting contract. No think tank. No podcast. Just gone." "I retired," I replied. "Honorably." She nodded. "On paper." I didn't speak. "You know how this works," she continued. "People with your training don't just vanish. They become assets or liabilities." "And this?" I asked. Was this supposed to scare me back into line? Her expression hardened. "It was supposed to confirm whether you were still operational." I laughed once. Dry. Bitter. "Well," I asked, "you got your answer?" "Yes," she said, loud and clear. She leaned back. The auction wasn't random. That parcel was flagged years ago. Training ground, black site adjacent, restricted airspace overlap. It was never meant to be sold. Then why was it? I asked. Because someone wanted to see who'd notice. The room felt smaller, and when I did, I said slowly, "They send dogs." She met my gaze. "They sent men who volunteered." "That's worse," I replied. She didn't argue. "They won't stop," Dana said after a moment. "Not unless this gets resolved." "Resolved how?" I asked. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were satellite photos of the mountain. Old ones, new ones, heat maps, overlays of signal dead zones. And my name, repeated. They want you back, she said. Consulting, training, advisory role. You'd keep the mountain. They'd stop testing you. I close the folder, and if I say no, her voice dropped. Then next time, it won't be deniable. Silence settled between us. Outside, the mountain stood patient and unmoved, like it had through every human conflict that came and went. You don't own this place, Dana added quietly. Not really. I looked at her. Watch me. She left an hour later. No threats, no deadlines, just a card. And a warning. That night, I climbed the lookout tower and watched the valley lights flicker on miles away. Civilization glowing like a promise I no longer believed in. I thought about Marcus, about the way he'd fought, the way he'd known. This wasn't over. So I did what I always do when things turn uncertain. I prepared. The next week passed in silence. No vehicles, no helicopters, no signals. Too quiet. On the 8th night, my radio crackled to life. Not my frequency, not any civilian band. A voice came through, distorted but familiar in cadence. Ghost Actual, it said. This is Overwatch. I froze. No one had used that call sign in years. You're trespassing on private land, I replied evenly. A pause. Then, we know. That's why we're asking, not taking. My grip tightened. State your intent. To talk, the voice said, about the thing buried under your mountain. The words hit harder than any bullet. I shut the radio off. Slowly, carefully, because now I understood. The auction wasn't about me. The thieves weren't about theft. And this mountain? It was never empty. It was hiding something. And everyone was finally ready to kill for it. I didn't sleep after the radio call. Sleep is a luxury when old ghosts start using your dead call signs. By dawn, I was already moving, packing, checking, rechecking. Not in panic, in preparation. The kind that settles into your bones after years of knowing that when someone finally speaks, it's because they are done waiting. I climbed down from the lookout tower and headed north, away from the cabin, toward ground I hadn't walked since the first month after I bought the mountain. Because I'd felt it then. Not proof, not evidence, just wrongness. Terrain doesn't lie, but it remembers. The northern ridge looked ordinary if you didn't know what to look for. Pine, shale, wind-carved stone. No structures, no markers, no reason to linger, except for the way the rock fractured. Natural rock breaks randomly. This didn't. The fissures followed lines, clean, deliberate. Old blasting scars weathered just enough to pass as erosion if you weren't trained to see the difference. I knelt and brushed snow away with a gloved hand. Concrete, old, reinforced, military grade. Son of a bitch, I muttered. The entrance was sealed, but not permanently. A false slab bolted from the inside, designed to look collapsed. Whoever closed it never expected someone to come back with time, patience, and nothing left to lose. It took me 3 hours to open it. What waited below wasn't just a bunker. It was a memory. The air inside was dry and cold, preserved like a tomb. My flashlight beam cut through dust that hadn't been disturbed in decades. Steel stays descended into darkness. Wiring ran along the walls, neatly bundled, labeled in a shorthand I recognized instantly. Black program. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Barracks. Empty. A command room. Dead monitors. Maps pinned to cork boards, some with regions I'd trained in, others I'd never been briefed on. And then the range. An underground firing lane, long and reinforced, with acoustic baffling and sensor mounts along the walls. Sniper training, but not standard. This wasn't about marksmanship. It was about patience, isolation, psychological endurance, breaking men down until all that was left was precision and silence. I'd heard rumors, whispers, a program that trained shooters so deep and alone they stopped thinking like humans. I'd laughed it off. Until now, I found the terminal in the deepest room. It still had power, a backup system buried under stone, running on a generator older than me, designed to wake when motion sensors tripped. When I touched the keyboard, the screen flickered. then asked for credentials. I didn't have them, but I had something else. I typed my old designation. The system paused, then unlocked. That's when I understood the truth. I hadn't just trained near this place. I had trained here, and they'd made damn sure I forgot. The files came slowly, corrupted by time but readable. Project name, Overwatch 0. Objective, develop autonomous long-duration sniper assets capable of independent mission execution without command reinforcement. In plain language, ghosts. Men dropped into environments and left there. No extraction timeline. No oversight. Just objectives and silence. The washout rate was catastrophic. The survivors, they were effective beyond measure and dangerous beyond control, which is why the program was shut down. Officially, unofficially, the mountain remained sealed, waiting for someone like me to come home. The radio crackled again as I stood in that room, the pause pressing in from every direction. Ghost Actual, the voice said. You found it. I didn't answer. You always did like going quiet, the voice continued. Listen, we don't want conflict. You sent armed men onto my land, I replied finally. That's conflict. A sigh. They weren't supposed to engage. They did. Because you're still lethal, the voice said. That's the point. I clenched my jaw. What do you want? I asked. Access, the voice replied. The facility, the data, the infrastructure. And me? A pause. Eventually. I smiled without humor. Not happening. That night, the mountain came alive. Drones, quiet, high, scanning. I spotted them easily. Military optics don't hide from someone trained to hunt them. Ground teams followed. Better than the last group. Real soldiers this time. Disciplined, careful, but cautious. They knew the stories. They knew who I was. I didn't defend the cabin. I defended the truth. I moved through the underground complex, sealing sections, rerouting power, triggering fail-safes I shouldn't have remembered, but did. Muscle memory doesn't care about amnesia. The first breach attempt never reached the main corridor. Flashbangs echoed uselessly through sealed chambers. Thermal signatures vanished behind layered stone and insulation. I spoke once over the radio. You step 1 foot inside, I said calmly, and this place collapses. Bluff? No. I'd found the charges. Old, unstable, enough to bury everything forever, including me. Silence followed. Minutes stretched. Then the voice returned. Quieter now. You'd really do that? Yes. Why? I looked around the room, the training lanes, the files, the ghosts of men who never left this mountain. Because some things should stay buried, I said, including me. Another pause. Then, if you walk away, others won't. I know, I replied, but they won't be me. By dawn, the drones were gone. The teams withdrew. No victory announcement. No threats. Just retreat. I collapsed the entrant myself, triggering a control cave-in that erased the access forever. The mountain shuddered, then went still. Days passed, then weeks. No more calls. No more visitors. I knew it wouldn't last forever. But forever is a civilian concept. For soldiers like me, there's only now and ready. I returned to the lookout tower one evening, watching the sun bleed into the horizon. I didn't buy this mountain to hide. I bought it because it remembered who I was before the world decided I was dangerous. Let them come again. The mountain knows my name. The world didn't come crashing back all at once. It crept. A satellite passing a little lower than it should. A weather drone lingering too long. A civilian survey request filed and withdrawn the same day. Pressure without fingerprints. I'd lived under that kind of attention before. It's how institutions breathe. Never loudly, never honestly. They wait for you to blink. I didn't. Winter came early that year. Heavy snow sealed the roads, erased tracks, and wrapped the mountain in silence thick enough to swallow sound. The kind of silence that makes men talk to themselves if they are not careful. I was careful. I rotated between positions, never sleeping in the same place 2 nights in a row. The cabin became a decoy, the lookout tower memory. I lived in the folds of the terrain, where heat vanished and shadows lied. Then, one night in January, the radio spoke again. Not Overwatch. Not government. Something worse. Ghost Actual, a new voice said. Calm. Confident. Female. You don't know me, but I know you. I didn't answer. You collapsed the facility, she continued. But you didn't erase the program. That got my attention. You were never the end product, she said. You were the proof of concept. I closed my eyes. So what do you want? I asked. To offer you a choice, she replied. One you won't get twice. She arrived alone. No escort. No drones. No armor. Just a woman in her 40s, hiking up a snow-choked ridge with a steady pace of someone who'd earned every step. She stopped 50 yards short of my position and sat on a rock, hands visible, breath fogging. I'm unarmed, she called out. I know, I replied from the trees. She smiled faintly, still sharp. Her name was Eleanor Price, former strategist, program architect, the one who'd signed the final shutdown order. I didn't know what we were building until it was too late, she said as we talked. By the time I understood, men like you already existed. You didn't shut it down, I replied. You buried it. She nodded. I thought distance would dull it. It doesn't, I said. It sharpens. Silence stretched. There are others, she admitted. Not many, but enough. I felt the mountain shift beneath my boots. Not physically, but in meaning. They're unstable, she continued. Unanchored. You were the only one who walked away intact. They didn't walk away, I said. They were abandoned. Yes, she said softly, and now they are being found. That was the real threat, not the mountain, not me. Ghosts don't stay buried when someone starts calling their names. They want you to lead them, Eleanor said. I laughed. A real laugh this time. Lead them where? Out, she said, or into something worse. I considered her words carefully. Leadership wasn't orders. It was responsibility. And responsibility was heavier than any rifle. What happens if I say no? I asked. She looked away. Then they'll use force. Or lies. Or hunger. Whatever works. And if I say yes? They stop coming here, she said. The mountain becomes yours in truth. I looked across the valley, white and endless. And the ghosts! She met my gaze. They get a chance. It took me 3 days to decide. 3 days of walking the ridges. 3 nights of listening to the wind carry voices that weren't there. On the 4th morning, I keyed the radio. This is Ghost Actual, I said. One-time transmission. Static. Then, go ahead. I'll talk, I continued. On my terms. A pause. Understood. They never came to the mountain again. Not physically. Instead, encrypted messages arrived. Coordinates, names, fragments of past operations. Men and women scattered across continents, living half-lives in shadows. I didn't give them orders. I gave them structure, purpose, rules. Disappear or re-enter clean. No violence unless necessary. No loyalty to flags. Only to each other. A network, not an army. The world didn't need another weapon. It needed a way to disarm one. Years later, the auction listing vanished entirely. No record of the sale. No satellite passes within legal distance. The mountain became what it always wanted to be. Quiet. I still live here. Not hiding. Guarding. Because some places are meant to remember. And some men are meant to make sure the past doesn't crawl back out of the ground wearing a new name. If you hike far enough north, you won't find my cabin. You won't find the tower. You won't find the entrance. But if you listen, really listen, you might hear it. A single shot echoing through history. Not a warning, a boundary. And once crossed, the mountain answers back.